On behalf of Red Hat, Presidio Federal, and Carahsoft, I would like to welcome you to our session, Unleashing Team Potential Through Automation. Now I'd like to introduce Paul Winslow, the Partner Alliance Manager for Presidio Federal. He brings a strong background in building channel programs with tech giants such as Dell, IBM, EMC, and Apple to this role, where he is responsible for evolving Presidio Federal's partner program. Paul's expertise in identifying and managing ISV, OEM, and VAR indirect sales channels supports Presidio Federal's ability to deliver the best combination of technology solutions for federal government customers. Take it away, Paul.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. Presidio Federal is extremely pleased to be co-sponsoring this event featuring Red Hat. Red Hat, as you'll please click, there we go. For those of you who have not worked yet with Presidio, the company is a 30-year business that's actually started back 30 years ago as a federal small business. And over the years, the company has just mushroomed over to almost a $4.5 billion organization. Recently, the company was acquired by a foreign national firm. And as such, in order to continue servicing our federal clients, we elected to spin off a wholly owned subsidiary working under FOCI, or foreign-owned influenced business, and we essentially have now a business that's separate but equal to the Presidio organization, following many of the protocols. If you can click to the next slide, please. We are about a 75-person company that is focused 100% on the federal mission. And we follow many of the same traits that the Presidio Corporation follows by having an engineering, consulting heavy business environment that listens to you, our federal customers, and helps you assess and evaluate your next moves as you execute your digital transformation journey. Our specific focus is, as it says on the slide, is to look at a hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure, addressing the cybersecurity concerns of the world, looking at the DR and continuation of operations solutions, and of course, helping you generate your high ROI for your AI solutions. The company is extremely well tuned for the federal message. We have a field sales force of approximately 10 folks, which have been in the marketplace for 25 plus years. So they're extremely senior and really hired and designed as listeners to be a consultant to you in your journey. Our existing contracts where we are serving are featured on the screen. These are the folks where we have the most bandwidth, but we are really attacking and attracting the interest of the federal government as a whole. Okay, very good. So the next step is for you to of course listen in, and if you find this topics of interest, we certainly would like to be part of the next conversation. Please find out a little bit more about us at presidiofederal.com, our unique URL, and or joining us on social media. And we look forward to working with you out in the field. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Red Hat team and Michael. I'm going to mispronounce it. Oh, sorry, Michael. Anyway, Mike.
There we go, Paul. Thank you. Appreciate it. We appreciate the information on Presidio, and we're glad you get to join us today here. So thank you, everybody, for attending here today. My name is Michael Bisaquino, as Paul said, and I am a sales director on the Red Hat team here at Carahsoft. I'd like to personally welcome you to today's Red Hat, Presidio Federal, and Carahsoft webinar. If you have any questions after the event, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly via the information displayed on your screen here now. Today, we bring you thought leaders to talk about Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform, which is Red Hat's tool for building and operating enterprise-wide IT automation. Carahsoft's partnership with Red Hat allows us the unique opportunity to put forward a solution that accomplishes a top-of-mind initiative for U.S. government agencies, delivering better services using fewer resources. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webcast. Joining us here today is Red Hat's Clara, Conti, and Egts. Egts is the Chief Technologist of Red Hat's North American Public Sector Organization, where he directs a team of technical experts to help his government clients improve service delivery the open source way. The Office of Chief Technologist, which he leads, adds value to flagship Red Hat technologies such as Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Openshift, Ansible, and Linux containers. Clara Conti is the Vice President and General Manager of Red Hat Public Sector, with over 20 plus years of experience leading organizations through transformations by reinventing company strategies, market positions, and empowering executive teams. By maximizing cross-functional agile leadership, Clara delivers grounded guidance to champion, energize, and unify all stakeholders. Clara, welcome and thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm Clara Conti, the General Manager of Public Sector here at Red Hat. I recently joined Red Hat, and I'm excited to be here. Many reasons, but most importantly, Red Hat is the world's #1 provider of commercial IT products and solutions based on open source software. And we lead by a large margin. More than 90% of Fortune 500 use Red Hat products and solutions. In the public sector specifically, Red Hat products and solutions are used in all 16 cabinet-level agencies and all 50 states. With approximately 16,000 employees in more than 40 countries, we have a worldwide presence, and we have the size and scale and capacity to meet our customers' needs. Next slide. Since the first release of Red Hat Linux and the company's founding in 1993, Red Hat has been expanding its technology portfolio. Red Hat has acquired numerous companies that have helped us broaden our portfolio. We are open source to these technologies that we acquire as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, our financial growth has been overwhelmingly organic, meaning our business is growing naturally rather than because we're buying customers through acquisitions. Over time, Red Hat has acquired several companies and technologies to enhance its overall portfolio. Next slide, please. Open source is more than developing software. It's how we've built our company. Next slide, please. IT vendors like Red Hat contribute to the development of open source software at every step. Individuals can contribute. While shared development reduces cost, it is also a powerful way to ensure that new features align closely with customer requirements. Red Hat commercializes the platforms together with a rich ecosystem of services and certifications, making innovation software government ready. Next slide. The culture of open source is the heart of its power. It requires collaboration and transparency to work, but the benefits are vast. Shared problems can be solved much faster than those worked alone, and examples abound. OpenStack was a collaboration among Rackspace, NASA, and others. SE Linux was a project among the National Security Agency, Red Hat, and other companies. Linux itself was an openly developed project started by one man, but made successful by many, many people. Tools and techniques that work well become standards, and standards promote greater efficiency and faster development. Standard APIs mean it's easier to make components work together. Standard processes allow for greater collaboration. And standard tools and repositories like GitHub mean even more people can help make a project better. Next slide. Open source is behind today's technology leaps, all things that make digital transformation possible. Infrastructure change from mainframes to x86 commodity market, which gave birth to Linux servers. Cloud innovation sprung from that well, and underneath all of the cloud is Linux. Applications move from monolithic single-use tools to reusable, flexible microservices, containers, and mobile. Networking and storage move from proprietary software components to software-defined and software-based tools that can be shared much more easily. Our customers and our employees want more modern application, connectivity, and control. These demands for efficiency and agility and innovation require organizations to look at new technologies in areas like cloud, mobile, and application services. Open source communities are very, very good at rapid innovation, collaboration, and addressing common problems within the power of community. However, agencies have needs that communities do not and should not, and we have to address those. This is where Red Hat steps in. We help organizations interact with open source technologies they need, getting changes and requests upstream. We are trusted by communities that cultivate innovation. They know we will not stifle or hoard it because by sharing, we can make it even better. We refine community software by performing QA and integration tasks and standardizing user interfaces. We offer the innovation of community software with the stability of an enterprise lifecycle and technology support. The community trusts us, our customers trust us, and this is our business model. Next slide, please. Our development process isn't just for Linux. We are involved in many communities, building and refining the many different technologies that make up today's IT environment. From the OS to storage to middleware, OpenStack and containers, all the way up to management and automation, Red Hat is helping build open source solutions to modern IT challenges. In the center, you'll see the open source projects that Red Hat sponsors and nurtures. In many cases, Red Hat is the lead sponsor. Both Red Hat and non-Red Hat developers like partners and other vendors contribute to these projects and are free to use the code as they wish. And on the outside, you'll see the fully supported enterprise products that Red Hat creates from these projects. Next slide. Our customers face a variety of challenges, optimizing existing traditional resources so they can continue to add value, integrating old and new systems, resources, and practices, building the modern apps and solutions that will take you further, simplifying management and automation of the hybrid cloud. And remember, cloud can't solve every challenge, and neither can simply improving your existing infrastructure. This is why the world is increasingly hybrid. IT organizations must balance these needs. Organizing our product portfolio by these customer challenges helps us talk about how each product interacts with each other. Next slide, please. This is our product portfolio. This stack doesn't represent anyone or everyone's architecture. However, it does show how our products work together to help you solve the challenges you face. Whether you're building hybrid cloud infrastructure, developing a cloud-native application, or managing and automating your IT, Red Hat has solutions that can help you move forward. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Egts, our Public Sector Chief Technologist. Dave?
All right, thanks, Clara. And hello, everyone. I'm Dave Egts, Chief Technologist for Public Sector here at Red Hat. And I'm really excited to meet with you all today as we talk about transforming government. You know, when I think about transforming government, it's more than just technology. It's more than just legacy IT systems and modernizing them. It's about changing the way governments engage with their citizens, as we've seen in the recent Biden executive order. It's all about changing the way government improves its mission outcomes. And, you know, with this in mind, you know, the technology is critical, but the technology alone won't transform government. What we really need to do is think about our processes. And not only the processes on the IT operations side, we need to rethink our processes within the lines of business, application development, operations, and security, right? And so in addition, we need to rethink the processes where these groups also interact and engage one another as well. And so we need to rethink how we attract and retain talent as well. Every executive order that I've been reading lately always talks about workforce, right? And these new technologies and processes require fresh ways of thinking. And that really challenges the status quo. And to do this, we really need to have strong leadership to create the environment for an open organization to thrive. So, all right, with all that, how do we get started? And a little while ago, I'll tell you a story. I did a fireside chat with Dr. Ann Shepard, who's the Associate CIO of the IRS. And thanks to her leadership, Dr. Shepard and her team, her organization, their roadmap, I asked them about this, how their roadmap was doing, and their roadmap was actually accelerated by 2 to 3 years due to the pandemic. And some of the reasons for that were COVID, and COVID really forced them to change how previously self-imposed barriers would come up, and they had to come up with new and creative ways to, meet their new mission objectives. So what are some of those ways that you can accelerate how your agency can accelerate their roadmap over the next 2 to 3 years? So, another way to move your roadmap forward is, you could work more or you could work harder, right? And we all know from the last 2 years that that's no longer sustainable. We're all realizing that we can no longer be in this sprint, but we're really in a marathon, and we need to pace ourselves accordingly. And with that said, the operational tempo of our work has greatly accelerated, whether we wanted it to or not. But this puts many of our team members, including ourselves, at the risk of burning out. And this leads me to another story. This story is about working harder. A little while ago, I was speaking with the state agency about how they were weathering the pandemic. And, they told me that they were really getting worn out. And I could tell, I could see them in the video call, they look tired, right? And, in fact, one lady, she told me that one of her mission critical applications that she was in charge of had a memory leak, and it needed to be restarted once a day. And she did that at 6 p.m., no matter where she was. And there was, even when she would go out to dinner with her husband, she would have to pull out her laptop, get in on the VPN, restart that application, right in the middle of the restaurant. And as you can imagine, she was just totally exhausted and would have much rather just spent that time in the restaurant, simply enjoying dinner with her husband. And you combine that with the pre-COVID conditions of attracting and retaining talent, the ever increasing number of government employees that are becoming eligible for retirement. And when you add in the increased probability of burnout, agencies are at extreme risk of losing critical talent that need to not only innovate, but just to maintain the status quo. So working harder really isn't the answer. So how can your teams work smarter? And I see something in the chat. Where do questions go? We got a Q&A box if you want to do that. And I'm also monitoring the chat, as you can tell as well. So, well, I think that the answer is automation for us to weather this, right? As we're all getting tired, we're all getting worn out, right? And one of the things I always say is that in order to innovate, you first need to automate. And, I ask agency leaders all the time whether they're automating enough, and every single time, everyone has told me that they always have room to go when it comes to automation. And so what you want to do is take a moment, think about some of the toil and drudgery that you and your team are putting up with that should be automated, right? What are some of those things? What are some of the newer, higher value things that your team should be working on to improve service delivery? And lastly, what impact would that improved service delivery have on team morale, your agency, as well as the constituents that your agency supports? So, I'm always looking at what the analysts are up to. And, IDC, they've done a lot of studies on the efficiency of automation with Ansible. And they came back with some amazing results for a study that we commissioned for them. And, and I've seen similar results too, where customer investments in automation have paid for themselves in 6 months. I've seen it firsthand. And you don't have to take IDC's word for it either. As part of the Ansible automation platform, we actually provide built-in analytics to tell you how much you're saving through automation. And this isn't like a calculator that will hypothetically tell you how much you're going to save. It's actually a calculator that shows real savings based on your actual use of Ansible in your organization. And this evidence comes in really handy whenever you're trying to justify that additional investment in automation to free up talent for improved service delivery. And it also comes in handy come raise time or promotion time too, to show to your boss what you've been up to. And so outside of saving costs and giving your team back time, what else can automation do for your organization? Interestingly, we found that automation not only can improve team productivity and morale, but it could also help transform culture across the organization. A little while ago, a coworker told me all about one of his customers who was struggling with all these duplicative efforts across the organization. They had all these different silos and they're just duplicating a lot of work. And every team was building scripts independently to provision servers and harden them, lock them down for security, and so on. And when he met with this customer, he told them in the meeting that Ansible was a language of love. And when he told me this, I'm like giving him a weird look, and his customers were giving him a weird look too. But what he really meant was that Ansible is the thing that breaks down silos and lets organizations share best practices. And what he did was he worked with them to build an automation community of practice that spanned these different silos, resulting in teams throughout the organization contributing to this community. So instead of duplicative efforts within teams, they all came together with the best practices distilled as Ansible playbooks that got continuously improved. Not only did this help the organization, but it really elevated the visibility of this community lead throughout the entire organization. And this thing isn't really theoretical, right? We actually have a proven methodology called the Ansible Automation Adoption Journey. And this is a methodology that helps you define a strategy, lay a foundation, drive consistent adoption throughout the organization. This process uses technology to improve your culture. And for me, I feel like an amateur psychologist sometimes. And so, at the end of the result, what does this mean to your team and your organization? Automation is a great way to free critical talent from toil and drudgery and focus more on the higher level needs of that organization to help improve service delivery. And if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you essentially can't address those higher level needs without addressing the lower level needs at first, right? You gotta work your way from the bottom up. And this is true in government IT as it is everywhere else. So let's walk through these from the bottom up. So at the bottom, you have your psychological needs. This is where you need rest, right? And so I think automatically automation is going to help prevent burnout and let people get some rest, right? Instead of being at the restaurant at 6 p.m. restarting that application. Then once you solve that part, you can move up to safety and security. And some of you may be worried about getting automated out of a job, and others may be worrying about inconsistencies in their environment that could lead to security leaks. And automation addresses both of these. Automation frees up teams from toil and drudgery and helps them work on those more meaningful things that you always wanted to do but never had the chance to do. And automation can also help you ensure that your security posture is consistent throughout the organization. And then once we solve that, we can move up to belonging, okay? And that's where many of us, identify either with the dev team, or we're on the ops team, or we're on the security team. And for people to do that, there's often a lot of us versus them and a lot of finger pointing, right? People are blaming the other group because they don't understand. But what automation does is it breaks down these silos and paves the way for DevSecOps becoming that language of love, right, that we talked about earlier. And then the next to last one is esteem. And you really can't feel like you've accomplished anything if you're doing that toil and drudgery that's not tied back to the mission. Automation really frees you up to do those meaningful things that make you proud of what you do. And it's tied back to the mission. And lastly, we're thinking about self-actualization. You can't be creative and you won't take even the smallest level of risk if you don't feel safe. And once you have the support and endorsement of your leadership, when we talk about psychological safety a lot, you can then focus on your full potential. At that point, you're at the top of this pyramid where government transformation really happens. And so once you have automation, an automation foundation in place, now your team can then have the time and the headspace to take service delivery to the next level. This is where Openshift can really help. Not only can it help you containerize, run, and scale your traditional applications, but it also lets you build new applications that are cloud native based on microservices. And then from there, you can go even further to use things like AI and machine learning to turn the massive data sets that you have into actionable insights to make everyone's lives easier. And so in summary, as we think about government transformation today, it's not just about the technologies and how we use those technologies to get us there. We need to think about changing our processes and taking care of our people. So as we go on this journey, automation, as we go on this automation, and automation is the best way to get us there. So those are the things that I had. I'm going to stop sharing, and we could take a look at the Q&A, and we could take a look at the chat. So if you all have, we could bring our speakers back on, and we could go through the Q&A. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Who is accountable for supply chain risk management, security, and integrity of open source products? How does, whoops, my screen just got full and I lost the question. How does Red Hat help? Let me see, there we go. How does Red Hat manage your supply chain and risk on your open products, open projects? So this is something, Clara talked about this earlier, right? Where, when you think about, there are really 3 stages where people can use open source technologies, right? There's the open source community, where there are thousands of projects out there where people can contribute and collaborate, and people could pull down the code and use it themselves. But once they do that, they're going to be, it's on them to do the maintenance of that supply chain. And then the second part is when you can have assemblies of these projects. So think about like all of the thousands of projects that are out there that get assembled into a Linux distribution. And we'll have things like the Fedora project or CentOS that, people can again use and contribute back. But again, it's still on the caveat emptor of the person that brings down that software. It's on them to be able to do that support. And the third way is to use commercially supported off-the-shelf open source. And these are the types of things where you could rely on the vendor to provide you with that authoritative guidance in terms of whether you're vulnerable or not. So let's take a look at, say, like the Log4j vulnerability that happened a couple of weeks ago. As soon as that came out, Red Hat had a page that said, we're very transparent about it. What products were vulnerable? Which ones had fixes? Which ones didn't have fixes yet, but we were working on it? And which products weren't applicable. And so that transparency, that is one of the things that open source really requires people to do, right? Is that, it's on the vendor to be very fast when it comes to changes, and also being able to provide that authoritative guidance. And the thing that people often overlook is that's really valuable is whether it affects you or not. Especially like there are plenty of Red Hat products where Log4j, we weren't vulnerable to it at all. And knowing that allows, it frees up those security teams to know what to look for whenever, for those problems that do exist that they should be chasing after. If you're the one that's pulling down the open source code yourself and assembling it, it's up to you to know whether you're vulnerable or not. And a lot of it is based on what version of what pieces of software you're using. So, relying on a vendor to do that is really important. So let's keep the questions coming. Does anybody else have any other questions that are out there, or do we have anything in the chat?
Hey, Dave, I can hop in here. First of all,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you, Clara, David, and Paul, for great information and session here. To your point, we do have a few minutes left, folks, so we'd like to take this time to answer any questions you may have. So feel free to use that Q&A pod. It should be in the toolbar section. I'll also ask a question here. So where should an agency start if they're early in their automation journey?
Yeah. And feel free, Paul and Clara, if you want to pile in too. But my initial take is, it's like, how do you get started? And a lot of times we find out that a lot of our customers are using Ansible in pockets all over the place, right? But it's not. There's no centralized community of practice, and people aren't talking to one another. And like I said, it's like that one customer. Everybody was having their own favorite lockdown scripts, and they know that automation is really necessary, but they're not really working together. And so building those communities of practice is just as important as using the technology.
Yeah, David, at the beginning of the VMware's journey, there was a great explosion of VMware user groups.
Yes,
in the federal community. Is there such a thing with Red Hat?
Yeah, so we have we call them RUGs, Red Hat user groups, and pre-COVID, It was super vibrant, where we would have like all over the place. We would have lunch and learns, and where people could come in, they could try out the products. A lot of that has gone virtual, but people can go to like meetup.com and find those, and those are still going on. The other thing that we have going on is it's our SA organization has tons of workshops that are going on as well, and so do our partners like Carahsoft. They're running workshops all the time where people can get in, and it's all remote. They could log in and then get through. They could get their feet wet with using automation, get some early successes to realize how easy it is to get going, and then move out from there.
Perfect. Actually, we just received another question. Is Ansible an RPA solution? If not, how does Ansible differ from RPA?
Yes. Yeah. So great question. RPA, robotic process automation, that is different than Ansible. Ansible is infrastructure automation, or infrastructure as code. Okay. So RPA is where you have like literally like a virtual robot that is scanning a screen, and it's filling out forms, and it's doing that automation from a instead of a knowledge worker doing it and just typing in things that are as we try to be more and more paperless. RPA does that. Ansible doesn't do that. Ansible does the automation of like, I want to provision a server, and I want it to be locked down according to the dissig. And you could use not only Ansible to define an individual system, but it could be for an entire workload that spans multiple systems, such as your networking equipment, your storage equipment, your database server, all your servers, whether they're Windows or Linux. You can have one Ansible playbook that can basically inflate that entire application, whether it's in a cloud or it could do it with bare metal. And then there's another type of automation that's out there too. It's where you can do business process automation. So that lies somewhere in between RPA and infrastructure automation. So with business process automation, Red Hat does that. We have a technology, it's called Drools. It's a business rule application system that will think about things like eligibility for Medicare or Medicaid, and you have all these rules in place, and you could navigate a customer through the rule-based system to see whether they're eligible or not. And as the cool thing about this is you could think about these rules as being a bunch of if-then statements, but those if-then statements are outside the application. And as legislation changes and as policy changes, you could change those business rules, those if-then statements, without having to rebuild the application. So as we see in the government these days, we have agencies that are, the policy is changing all the time, especially as we are responding to COVID, in the moment, right? Being able to change those business rules, on the fly without having to rebuild the app, and the risk associated with rebuilding the app goes away.
Wonderful. So how does Presidio Federal and Red Hat work together to support an agency's efforts to modernize through automation?
Well, I can venture to offer Clara the opportunity to chime in on that, because she's very familiar with us.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I had the opportunity to lead Presidio Federal prior to coming to Red Hat, and I can tell you there's a number of things and projects that we've worked on together in the past. Presidio provides all kinds of support in terms of cloud certified engineers, and the certifications that's needed to move forward on a lot of these big projects. What's really great about working with them is that they understand where these customers are moving. They understand the technology that's involved, and they make the investment. So not to brag on Paul's group too much, but they have made the investment of moving forward and making sure that folks have understand all of Red Hat's products and all the certifications that's required. So we go to market a lot, and we continue to look for new opportunities to work together.
Yeah, and I'd further the notion that it's good to find a partner like Presidio Federal because we not only talk about the core Red Hat solutions, but we also look around the edges for complementary third-party solutions, which coincidentally Carahsoft has relationships with. It's a very inclusive club here. So give us an opportunity, either us or Red Hat team, to open up the kimono, have an open conversation, see what your goals and objectives are, and then map out a roadmap that will improve the situation in your agency.
Fantastic. Thank you both for that answer. And I think that's a great way to start closing out. Folks, if you have any more questions, this is the time. Drop them in the Q&A box. If not, I just want to say thank you again, Clara, David, and Paul, for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. We would also like to thank all of you for joining us. We hope that you found this webcast informative and helpful to you and your organization. I'll actually offer some additional resources in our chat box right now. Please feel free to visit our website. There's a couple of resources here that are relevant. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please contact our team via the information displayed on your screen. At the close of today's event, you will see a survey poll. We ask that you take a minute to answer a few brief questions to help us improve future presentations and events. Finally, we will be emailing you all a link to a recorded version of this webcast so you can review it or pass it along to a colleague. Thank you again for tuning in.